drinking spicy hibiscus tea. We're feeling free. Isn't that the best kind of place to be? Just having a moment between you and me. I'm having fun with my Sharma. Having fun with my girl, not to alarm ya. Yeah, we're getting good karmas. Kicking back on my podcast called I Don't Know. This episode with my Sharma. Something sinister to it. I didn't know I could do it. If I put my mind on it, then I'll have a clue into it. Gotta spend some years with that idea, let me stew on it. You're listening to IDK with Caroline Yost. I don't know, do you? This episode was a good one. Me and Maya, once you get us started talking, it's harder to get us to stop. I hope you like it. Mwah.
Hi.
Okay.
Great.
Ooh, I need my tea.
I really am enjoying it.
It's really nice. They call it spicy.
And it is. But I think
You think it's spicy?
it has like a
kick.
yeah, because I was gonna be like, oh, it's juice, but juice doesn't have this much soul.
Oh,
because don't you think it has kind of like
Yeah. It's complex.
yeah exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's sort of
juice
like
doesn't do that much.
Juice does not do that much. It has like a journey like along the tongue, like sort of like it's sweet when you first have it, and then like you get the sense of the kick or like something else in the back of the mouth.
And I'll tell you what, it's lingering on the sides of my tongue.
Yes, it's like sides and back. It makes me want to bang, and it's like kind of sweet in the front. Yeah, it's funny because I think there is something like cayenne pepper in it or something. But it's not like
No. No, and it's not like nutmeg. It's not like, ooh, winter spice.
No,
I'm telling you, it's got soul. It's got its own thing.
right. It's alive.
Yeah.
This tea is alive. And it comes from living things.
Right.
A lot of people maybe don't know that about teas.
Yeah. Even a dried leaf.
Their dried leaf, which was once
A tree.
a tree. Or a shrub. Or a piece of grass.
Might as well be.
It's good for us. Okay. Well, I don't know what that was. Just kidding. I know exactly what it was.
Exploration.
Two incredible people just exploring what a taste is like. And I really like to do that.
I know.
Sometimes I think like one of the greatest joys of food is just like if you are with a person and you're eating the food and you're describing the food while you're eating it.
I find it is one of my great joys. I feel like it feeds whatever. I feel like it feeds like a sense of self-worth in me to be able to describe.
All things?
I feel powerful when I describe. So like,
wow.
Even I was thinking when you were talking about like, oh, just describing food, I'm like also like color and like what a color feels like, that kind of thing makes me feel very proud.
Wow. Yeah, like when you find a unique way where you're like, that is so true.
It feels like, oh, me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm a brilliant mind. That's amazing that you sort of like are surprised by your own genius at times. And then suddenly you're like knocked awake by that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
No, it does.
I'm powerful.
It is a moment where I feel powerful.
Yeah, because you're creating. Like you're rendering the idea of something in the minds of others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome to my podcast, Maya Sharma, good friend, collaborator, and wild woman.
I would never done it in any world would I describe myself as
I don't
wild.
think I would describe you as a wild woman either. But you have a wild imagination.
I do.
Yeah.
Internally.
Yeah. But it's more internal than external, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do like to cut a rug on the dance floor.
That's true.
Yeah. That's probably when you fully let loose, isn't it?
I really do have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that was, I always felt like at Oberlin, I always felt like a pretty strict social hierarchy.
Yeah.
And then like once dancing started, I was like, it breaks down.
Wow.
You know?
And it's just like, I can show everyone how fucking cool I am.
I'm like, it was cool to dance freely.
Yes, and to be like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me.
Even like the people at the top of the totem pole were like really dancing. And I was like, oh, what cool permission.
Right.
Because in other spheres, I didn't feel I had permission to like
let loose. Wow. So everyone danced crazy there.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That's really fun.
And that kind of stuff.
I love a culture of emphatic dancing.
Yeah. And and it was like that. It was either like a 90s, early 2000s, like reclaiming of a Britney Spears song through like free dance as opposed to like that kind of like choreographed poppy movement. Poppy.
Yeah. Everything that all Britney's choreography is so like, it's like, it was like decide like the woman was like, this is gonna be like a cardboard figure could do this stuff, and it's all about like angles and like spinning around.
Yeah, true.
Like, on one axis.
The axis.
Like there's no like up and down.
What's it called? Vitruvian Man or something? What's his name?
I don't know, but that's interesting.
What is he called?
Vitruvian Man.
Is that what he's called? The Michelangelo's like the man.
Oh, the man with all the arrows. And stuff. Yeah.
Every angle of the man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What? Do you know what that was about? I don't know what that was about.
I mean,
what the idea was. Like, what was he showing us about
my
the man?
made up reasoning is
good
for art. For rendering art? People
right. It was like his
plane.
System, a design of his system of how to like look at a person.
Yes.
That makes most sense. But then he also was like an engineer, so I was like, is there some kind of
trying flying?
Yeah, sci-fi element to the man, and he's hoping that the man will break apart into infinite little pieces.
Right, a man is infinite pieces.
And when the man breaks off, he will go in every direction. In the direction of the lines, of course.
Right.
So I think we're already doing it.
Yeah.
The purpose of the podcast, the thing that keeps me going. We are being honest, funny, intuitive. We are allowing ourselves to say, I don't know what that is. What is that? And you're like, and I don't know the answer, but why don't I give you one? That's what this podcast is about. That is what I'm all about these days.
It's very juicy.
It is juicy, and it's just liberating. And I seek to liberate others. That I never have said that before, but I'm feeling it right now.
Yeah.
So that's one of my new ideas. I seek to liberate others.
That's kind of
and you know
lofty.
how I think you can do that?
Yeah.
By liberating yourself.
Right. I was like, liberate others. That sounds kind of like a lofty goal, or like very self-focused. I want to liberate others.
Wow.
Or not self-focused, like an exertion of power.
Right. It could be that.
It could
it's funny
be that.
It's like the opposite of liberation is oppressing or something, and so it's like.
Yeah.
Wow, it seems almost oppressive to want to liberate others.
Right. But then I love, right? What does it come back to?
The self.
Yes.
By liberating the self. Turning on the self.
Yes.
Well, yeah. And I mean, quite frankly, you really can't liberate someone else. Like, but the only way you could do it, I feel like, is by showing someone how you have liberated yourself.
Yeah, and how cool to see.
How fun and amazing it is when people just like feel free and fun, and they love themselves 100%. And love each other and love the world.
I know. Well, that's what I mean. Obviously, it hasn't kind of started in earnest yet, but that's also like you're giving the space, right? You're creating a space.
I'm creating a space, and the space is here and now. Wow, doesn't that feel really good? I got sort of self-conscious the other day because of the way that I looked at a photograph that was taken of me at an event, because I was like, and you know, and my face looks so flat. It looks so round and flat, like pancake mode. And I kind of mentioned it to my friend Pippa Passion, and she was like, well, normally we don't see images of people looking that ecstatic.
Right.
Like, people aren't expressing that much joy, and when people express that much joy, they look crazy.
It's got a whole other thing.
And I was like, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's funny, Sarah Hennessy at the show that we performed at yesterday.
Yeah.
Before you got there, did you see the tail end of hers? No.
She was like saying her last sentences when I came on.
She has a great, she talked about, and it was so funny, like how at the show when there's a photographer, she's always like, yes, I'm going to get my picture taken. And it's like really, really exciting. And then you get the picture back and you're like, oh, I'm ugly when I express myself. I'm really like, I can't believe I look like that when I'm having the time of my life.
Right. And you're really kind of taking a
and also
risk.
She's not
like,
ugly.
You're not thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Wait, like photos of her on stage?
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And then throughout the set, she would do something that was like joyous and fun and funny.
Yeah.
And then she'd be like, well, we'll see what that looks like, you know?
Yeah.
It was funny.
Yeah. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Of being a performer. Mm-hmm. Whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But I think that is like... But it's sort of good. I'm like... Or part of the reason why I was talking about it with passion, because I was like... I'm feeling so good, and I'm doing all these things that make me feel so free, and I don't have as much resistance, and I'm like feeling comfortable doing things that I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing before, like being vulnerable, doing this shit.
Right.
And she was like, well, and I was just kind of talking to her about it, because I was like... I didn't want to feel like I didn't like how I looked. I like to think like I'm trying to take more risks with how I present myself and like not confine myself at all and be as expressive as I feel I can be in public. And then I was like...
Right. Resistance.
I felt bad about that, and I was like...
100%.
I'm supposed to be saved and enlightened at this point. I'm feeling amazing. I'm like on the other side. Like there is misery in life, and somehow I have crossed over to the other side where misery is a but a distant nightmare.
But then hello. The enlightened piece of it is process and practice.
Yes,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean?
And that's how I kind of came around to it, where I was like, oh, I had such like a peak of ecstasy in the past few weeks, and then I was like, this is just like kind of coming back to be like, right, life is ongoing.
Right.
You don't feel your highest all the time.
Yeah, I feel like I was talking to you about this at some point. I think it was like right when you got back from Thailand. And my therapist, because I've never had any relationship to meditation, and even still, I'm not sure I know what it feels like for me, but she described it in a way that I was like, oh, well, that's an in, where it was like, meditation is just returning. It's like, it's not clear, it's not empty, it's the act of returning, it's the practice of returning. And I was like, oh, cool. What a great like guiding light is not to limit expression, but to return to like the self.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely. I think that's a great way to think about it, because you're trying to like let go, but letting go can even be like a triggering thing to hear when you're like, well, I'm holding on. I don't know how. Like I don't know how to let go, or like have like still your mind or like clear your thoughts. I feel like a lot of people think that that's like what it's about, and it's like, no, your mind is gonna have a lot of thoughts, and it's just about noticing that you're having the thought and coming back and beginning again. I think actually that conversation that we had, we were sitting on a couch much like this at the Brooklyn Comedy Collective, where Maya is the programming director. So she's making creative decisions, or kind of.
Sort of.
Kind of.
Voice of the theater kind of stuff. And ethos of the theater.
Right. Community building. So she does that, and we're also in a comedy group together, Lady Free Ranch. And there's kind of like a combination of like, we were having this conversation about one of my favorite things that we do together, and we do with our group Ladies Ranch, is improv. And we've been talking about this a lot recently. We just did the show last night, and it was just 3 of us, but we had such an amazing fun time doing that improv, making them up. And making them up. And I think we were having this conversation where I was having one of those nights where I was like, I'm out late, but I'm totally sober. And I'm just like getting off on connecting with people and talking to people that maybe I wouldn't think to talk to, but then I'm having this beautiful conversation with you because we love to get into it. And you were talking about your improv class and the way that you're teaching improv. Do you remember what it was?
Of course not.
It was like about being like the 2 things you need to do to improvise is just like having fun.
Oh, having fun and listening to each other.
We
teach so many what I think are really helpful and unlocking tools and techniques in our improv curriculum. And we teach all of that, and I emphasize it, and I try to unlock it in people. And then on the last class and before the show, I say, you've learned the skills. If a skill occurs to you, that's beautiful. Right now, all that's important is that you please yourself and listen to each other.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's great improv. It like encapsulates the spirit of how we all should be like kind of on stage and maybe in life together all the time. But I think that like, you know, both of us, I think, have been very inspired by how improv, it seems, at least in the New York, Brooklyn scene, is having a little bit of a comeback.
I know.
It had withered and just become like a soulless corporate monster for a while in other corners of New York City.
Hello. And no comment.
And no comment about them.
But, you know, not only was it that piece, but it was also like the perception of improv got very like khakis and a blue shirt. Like it became very dirty blonde hair, dirty blonde hair, it's a boy. Do you know what I mean?
Crop dirty blonde hair, it's a boy.
Like it felt very like
broy
and just sanitized and like
and uninspired.
Yes, it wasn't about breaking through. It was about like playing the role, doing it well,
playing the game, doing the job well.
Doing it well. Yeah, that was always
absolutely
what really turned me off about the other philosophies of improv that I had learned. This idea of like doing a good job, or like doing like adhering to principles in such a good way.
Yeah.
And then also from the outside, it was like, I think people were like, oh, this is kind of like corny and cringe because it's very like static and like self-impressing. I did a good job versus like something fun happened here today.
Yeah. You know, and like, oh, we're being clever or something.
Exactly.
Or just seeing people try to improvise with those kind of like regulations in mind, or like teachings in mind, or like values in mind, where it's like, I have been taught how to do this and I'm trying to follow the rules and I'm trying to do all this stuff. And when you're not just the best improv you ever do is like when you get really present and you're like almost in a flow state while you're playing it. And it's like, 100%. Oh, that stuff, especially when you're new to performing in general, gets you so in your head. And like you're doing math or something. And I just feel like it was something that for me for a long time made me feel like I wasn't that good at improv or something, and I had wanted to be good at it, and there were times where I really enjoyed it, and then other times where I was like, I'm constantly getting in my way because like one of my...
Trying to figure out the right like chess piece, the right move.
Yes.
Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Yes, what am I supposed to be... And then like being really self-critical at the same time of being like, I didn't follow that instinct. I should have just gone. Or like... And part of that, I think, is... or like you say something and no one laughs and you're like judgmental of it in the moment, or you're judging your ideas before you even go out on stage and say anything at all.
Well, I had a moment like that during our show yesterday. I felt really good about our show yesterday, but you know, process of returning, right?
Yes, dude, I was just gonna say that because I was like, that's part of like the practice when you're on stage in an improv set, is if like something doesn't come out as you planned or doesn't seem to like come across or hit as you had hoped, as we all hope that we're always doing perfectly well explained and communicating with people and making them laugh all the fucking time. You have to return. You have to be like, whatever. Well, tell me about your experience of this in the show yesterday.
Oh, yeah. So it was, we had this really, really fun scene where Caro was like a just scouted new pop star, and Kelly was like the record label executive, and then I was the CEO. I was like the owner of Columbia Records, who also happened to be Kelly's dad. I mean, obviously fun.
Yeah. We were playing. And Kelly kept calling you her mom. And I was like, Kelly, we established that you're her freaking dad.
I know. But once we did that, then once she said mom, I was like, oh, I got to go with that. And then I kept forgetting because I was like, I had this self-concept. But I wanted to, this wasn't
Was that not that wasn't the thing?
That wasn't the moment. That was like, that was minor. That was a fleeting, like, whatever.
Yeah.
No, the moment was we had a moment that was a sidebar because we had established like some dynamics that would be really fun to explore of like, I love to see her grow, but she's not doing a good job.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's going to be really fun for us to dig into as like parent and child.
Yeah.
And then she was putting out all of this fun stuff about herself, and I wasn't listening because I was thinking about what is the right emotion. What emotion should I be feeling right now? What would be the right take to express, to bind together the ideas of, I love watching you grow and you're not good enough.
Yeah.
How do I express that in a clear way, in a funny way? And I got really in my head. And then I started to say it and I was like, oh, this is not coming out right at all. And then you came in and I was like, good. done.
Yeah.
But it was such a fun set. But I did, when we've been talking about that getting in your head, I was like, yeah. And it still, even the most fun sets, there's always a moment or two where I'm like pulled out by trying to think about the right thing to do.
Yeah, it can happen. Yeah. And that's, I think, like one of the things that is so cool and exciting about improv too, is that like, even if you're really good at it, like you always have to be like, it requires you to keep coming back to it and like being there doing it. Like you can't just like phone it in.
No.
But also then when you're doing it and it's working, it doesn't feel like work at all. Right. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, and actually I think I've said this on the show before, but like I had the idea for this podcast after our amazing show at
New York Comedy Fest.
And that's what that was. Clouty. I'm a celebrity.
I'm a celebrity with good ideas.
I'm a celebrity with good ideas. Oopsies.
No.
I went big. But when I was doing that, but I just felt like that was a show where we were like very much in that flow state. And when you're doing that, it's like time is suspended. Like you are just listening.
Yeah.
It feels like you could do it forever.
Yep.
Making connections and stuff and all this stuff that is like foundational in improv happens, just occurs to you and happens naturally. And it's funny because sometimes I think about how, so like I did some improv training in Chicago, at IO.
Yeah, I never talked to you about that.
Yeah, and like it was really cool. Yeah. And it was honestly like the first time I went to Chicago, this was when I was younger and I was like just kind of learning about improv and stuff. I had this feeling where I was like, wow, improv just like broke my mind open of like how I could relate to the world. Like I was definitely like pretty domineering and like, most ambitious and just like aggressive about my ideas, I think. Like, and I think I had this like conception that like I'm right and I know how things should be. And then like doing improv and learning about improv like taught me that like they just have this like the spirit of the improv training in Chicago is about like really embracing it as like collaboration, like high level collaboration. And I think sometimes that's where like the idea of like the deal from the annoyance like came out as sort of like a reaction to that, because like there's a way of interpreting that where it's like, well, I'm just like serving my partner and making sure my partner is taken care of. But I think those are kind of like, well, those are just kind of like, but it's funny because I'm like, I'm getting lost.
No.
But all these things, like all these signifiers, or I think I was just very excited about it. And it felt like the very first time I learned about, I first did like an improv thing, it felt like it fundamentally changed how I like my worldview
the other
or
side
something.
of the globe.
And I remember like I was in a college sketch group and when I came back, like everyone was like, you're different. Like because I was like so aggressive so cool. and like dictatorial before in the group, and then like I was like chill.
That's crazy.
And it took me a long time from that first experience with improv, and then I went back to Chicago and I did training in New York and stuff, like to get to where I am now. But you know, Del Close is like the granddaddy king there, and they sort of worship him out in Chicago. But they have like all this like lore at IO, especially about like Del being a wizard. And like there's like an improv thing called like invocation where you're like trying to like, it's an exercise or maybe it's an opening where I don't remember how it goes, but this kind of thing is like you're
it's got this
invoking something as a group and like getting the spirit of it into like the room and stuff like that. And all of that stuff makes so much sense to me now because like it does feel like spiritual. Like when like to me like this thing of just like listening and having fun, and that's like all you need to do. It's like you're just like tapping in to like your spirit and the collective spirit of the room and surrendering yourself to the moment and like taking a leap of faith and like creating something with people. And it's so out of the head, like when you're really connected to it in a way where I'm like, oh, it makes sense to me that like I saw a mentalist at the annoyance. One of my teachers was like, I want to call him a magician, but hypnotist.
Oh, really?
He was like a hypnotist. Like that there's like these like sort of like strange tangential like magic. But it's interesting actually. I have something to say about magic, but something that I think like in the mainstream concept of what magic was like. You know, like people who are like into magical stuff, like Del Close being a wizard, whatever.
Yes.
But in some ways, I'm like, to me, like that is actually the way to like do the good improv is to like be able to like be in touch with yourself and other people.
I mean, it's like such a classic. It's a classic thing that really feeds me or like when something is corny and you're like, well, I believe it. It's like the improv principles that hit the hardest for me are also like have everything to do with how I want to live my life.
Wow.
And so, it's
a way of life.
It really, doesn't it? It feels like
that's like it's syrup. A Simple Town sketch.
Oh, really?
Like improv, it's a way of life. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But it's true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's funny because it's true.
There
you go. Comedy.
But it feels like the work that I am doing in my own life to live the kind of life I want to live is very much centered around like checking in, accepting what I find, and proceeding with all of that information in mind.
Yeah.
So it's like the idea of like I feel stuck so often and I feel really like stagnant in many different spheres of my life, and noticing how my body feels, noticing like, oh, like I'm uncomfortable, or oh, like this is, it really comes down to like kind of comfort shit.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like, oh, it's a little cold or whatever. Noticing that, being like, okay, cool. I want to get a glass of water. I want to change positions. But like starting that small.
Right.
Then noticing the accepting the action.
Right. Like rather than feeling it being cold and being upset by it. Like
Yes.
Reactively, more like bringing yourself to that to be like, I'm cold. What can I do about this?
Exactly. Exactly. And as opposed to zoning out, not even noticing at all.
Right.
Or starting with action, starting with, I want to be comfortable.
Right.
No, notice where you're at now to figure out how you want to be comfortable.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so the improv
Right.
at its best is this kind of like a naturally occurring version of that principle, where it's like in every moment you notice what the other person's giving you. You notice the feeling in the room. You notice the feeling in your own body.
Yeah.
You accept it in an instant. In an instant, it's like, yes, okay.
Yeah.
And then the action comes out of the noticing and the accepting.
Yeah.
You don't need to be like, I want to be good. You don't need to be like, oh, I want to establish this in that scene.
Yeah.
It's literally like taking in info and acting accordingly in a way that's giving you pleasure.
Yeah.
That it's like a naturally occurring form of this thing I'm trying to practice in all areas of my life.
Yeah. And it's so exciting when you have a moment like that. Like to notice something.
Yes.
And then to like without any resistance, like accept it and to get an idea from that. It is exciting. Like,
it's generative.
Yes. And like in like a scene when that happens, it's like you're like, well, I know just what to say.
Exactly.
You know what I
It
mean?
just comes
like,
out.
You just say it and you just like label it or whatever in like more jargony terms. And then you're like, oh, that's the new thing.
Right.
And you can, and it's fun to be like, it's funny because like the word reacting, I think sometimes feels like laden with like, oh, like it's like, it's not with space or something. It's not done with space. But there's like a way where it's like, you're like freely just being like, I'm living this or something.
Listen response. Because in order to react, you need to be able to take in, right? It's not like it's not you striving for something. It's an immediate. It's reflex. It's when you hit the knee.
Yeah. And you're not like trying to be like, what am I seeing here? What am I seeing here? And what can I say that heightens what I'm seeing here? Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, reactivity also has that kind of bent of like, reactivity can feel like too big, or like it can, like when you're reactive to something, it's like you can fly off the handle. Like I think about like anger as reactive.
Right.
But I think in order, like the reactivity that like makes the most sense to me, or that feels like beautiful and generative, is the listening is there. Right. You know what I mean? I think like
it's sensitive.
Right. You're noticing the anger in the moment. You're noticing what the other person has given you, and you're reacting accordingly, not just like feeling the immediate hit and going, yes, you know. And in that way you're like able to be sensitive, more like in line with like the truth of what has been said or whatever. And then that's something that like the audience, that is already evident to the audience on the outside. Well, that's the whole thing. Yeah. I always say in improv, the audience sees everything. They're watching. They're watching you. They're watching you. And they're there to be entertained. Yeah. And so if you spend the entire time trying to do the right thing, they're going to feel the hesitance. They're going to feel the self-doubt. And they're not there for that. They're there to have fun, which only comes from you having fun. Yeah. It does not come from doing good improv. It comes from you having fun. Yeah. The good improv piece is listening, right? So you can react appropriately. But yeah. And the power of having a group, because I feel like it took me like until I had a group like Ladies Who Ranch, like that was my friends that I did improv with. I never had enough fun to be like, I love this. Yeah. And then, but you do have to be having fun. And I think that's where maybe having a group of like-minded people comes in, because then you're more on the same page about like how you have fun or whatever. Yeah. Like, because I think that can sometimes be the fear with people you don't know. Right, especially when you're more green of like being like,
I don't know if people are going to think what I think is fun, and then you feel self-conscious and insecure about that or whatever.
But it's that sense of trust. It's like we've built a sense of trust over many years.
Yeah.
To the point where we can take the risks.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's funny because sort of like the hostile POV on improv that existed in New York City, like until it feels like this present moment. I mean, real ones have been doing it.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But it's like been sort of like, you know, people did a lot of mashups where like Wes Haney had Singless Motel, where like the show was like a bunch of stand-ups and then some improv people, but it's like that's kind of how you made it cool by having people who like did their own thing and then they do this mashup or whatever.
Right, the improv like, on its own.
Teams, like improv people, like it's kind of a bad rap.
Yeah.
It's like the hostility towards it. It's like, oh, it's not supportive to how people need to be relating to it to like, but it can be so fucking good.
Right. It's just, it's like, again, it's so corny, but it's like, these are the principles that make life more enjoyable.
Make life better.
They make life better when you practice the principles you do in improv, and it's this like getting like a shot of that. It's this concentrated hit of the thing that like makes life good.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really, it's my favorite thing on the face of the planet.
It's so much more interesting than like written material from one person's perspective.
100%.
I mean, obviously it's less concise and maybe less to the point and like harder to digest, hit or miss. It's like more of a fickle beast. It's like a person who's like a psychic, like might not always be able to have the same results based on unknown factors or whatever. Like,
sure,
I don't know.
No, it makes
that's
sense.
Like something that makes sense to me, but like maybe there's a lot of stuff in that doesn't make sense to everyone.
I'm down to roll with it. Yeah,
but it's like it is sensitive itself. You know what I mean? Like, or like the balance of flavors in a dish or something. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's not cooking.
Yeah.
I am bad at cooking. I'm bad at cooking because I don't.
If you brought your improv background to your cooking,
imagine
it would make your cooking better.
Totally delicious. No, I
just in tasting and noticing how it tastes.
Right. What does it need?
I don't know.
Noticing, accepting.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with it. My therapist. I've been in therapy my whole life.
Yeah.
But I've had so many different therapists. And I just started going. I didn't go for all the pandemic, which was like kind of silly and rooted in fear. But I started going to a new therapist in June, and she's really kind of blown my mind open.
Yeah, what did she say about like
resistance
plus pain equals suffering?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Or pain plus resistance equals suffering. Yeah. I've been thinking so much about resistance recently because one of the things that made me feel like I have this new lease on life was suddenly noticing that I didn't have as much resistance. And I think that is a direct consequence of my meditation practice. And just feeling so liberated by that. And I thought that was interesting too, because it's like we want a world rid of suffering.
Yep.
And it's interesting when you think that so much pain and resistance, like that's something you inflict, especially someone like me who has been so, I feel like in my childhood, in my life, I've been like very well provided for, very well taken care of. I don't have a lot of trauma that I've had to work through. I'm like, my suffering has been like inflicted by myself.
Right, sure. Crazy.
Like that's what it feels like. Like when I think about something like this, like pain plus resistance equals suffering.
Right.
Because I mean, I have some pain obviously in me or whatever.
No, and of course, and wherever you come from, whatever your deal is, like, the pain's there. It's a natural way.
There's things that happen in life that are difficult. And
always.
Trying.
But then in that case, right, it's like, the pain, which is naturally occurring.
The resistance is you.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that blew my mind open big time.
Yeah.
What's become tricky about it is like, oh my God, I've got all these awesome ideas now and all this awesome framework.
Okay, good. This is one of my awesome ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about you?
Oh, well, my awesome ideas, and it comes back to a lot of what I've already
Are they
said.
art ideas or are they other kinds of ideas?
No.
Oh, no.
Well, that's,
ideas just about life.
Yes.
Yes!
And
that's what this is. Yeah.
So those awesome ideas, of which I've, like, the two big ones are pain plus resistance equals suffering and notice, accept, action. Those
you're
feel
feeling
like,
empowered by these ideas.
Yeah. They're really, like, making my brain kind of fizz in a cool way. But now I'm struggling with the practice of those ideas. Those ideas on their own are really exciting. Yeah. But then, like, you have to start to practice those ideas in order to really reap the benefit.
Right.
And I'm having a lot of trouble implementing.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I talked about actually with Richard was that it takes a long time to make change. Or like even when you have an idea and even if you recognize that like you're like, oh, this would benefit me or this is the way that I want to live my life. Like I recognize something special in this. Like it's like a process. Like it might be like 2 years
it's just
until you start figuring out how to implement it.
It just feels like a really big bummer because it's like in a way that I don't like to think about it. It's like I feel like, all right, now I have to start the long process. Right. I couldn't have started it a couple years ago. Yeah. And now I'm, whatever. Yeah. Not that being 30 is a bad thing at all. But like, I feel like, oh, I'm 30 and I'm just starting to break this rock open.
Yeah. But to me, it almost feels like something that comes with like, there's something about getting older.
Right, that allows you to even access.
That like leads you to want to explore this in the first place. Like, I mean, I think in unique places, people figure things out early or in like unique circumstances. But I think that like when you are young, you're so filled with like energy and hubris and enthusiasm and ego, and you don't know as much about yourself or the world or what you value. And I think that like I actually had this one moment in my early teens, like when not my early teens, my early 20s, when I first started getting like depressed and stuff, where I had this thought about my experience as a child, where I was just like running on hot air. Like I don't even know what I was about or something like that. And it was like because I just like had so much confidence and I had so much enthusiasm. But I think it was like I was more connected to what I'm connected to right now. Which is that like there is beauty in life that can be accessed if you like take care of yourself in this way.
That confidence is I feel the exact same way, where I had this unbelievable confidence that made me unbelievably creative in a way that like I didn't question for a second. And then something happened, and all of a sudden it was lost on me, like what I offered. Or it became a question. Versus like...
What age, out of curiosity?
I think I was talking about this today. At beginning of college, I had this like crazy social shakeup at the end of high school. Big drama energy that really, really shook me. And that kind of made me a little sheepish. I was still kind of like dumb and young and harmful and like,
and making the mistake of enacting harm.
Exactly.
To myself and unto others.
Yes, absolutely. So I was still kind of like acting big and bold, but like my perspective, my sense of confidence was like really, really shaky. And then I was in a relationship in college that really like, I was with that shaky self-confidence. I was like, oh, I'll make this person's thing the thing I care about. Which I think like was that was damaging. A yucky, bad thing. And then I came to New York and found the annoyance and found you guys. And all of a sudden like I was feeling it again. And that was so exciting of like, especially after such a sustained time of this offness. And then especially after a relationship, I could point to a person and a time that hampered me. Having that like object was like, great, I'm gonna bust that open. And all of a sudden I was creative again. And all of a sudden it was like, what an opportunity I have here to really, really let loose and let go. And then something's happened again where I'm feeling sheepish.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what happened.
And you don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying is making me think about how, like, I think especially as, like, mental health and psychology has gotten, and therapy in general has gotten more adopted in the mainstream. You hear people talk about like, the narrative that I have in my head or, like, the story that I have.
Yeah.
And I've recently kind of been reflecting on this because I think that actually the story that I've had in my head has hurt me at times or gone in the way of, like, my growth and my healing.
100%.
And I was like, when we have a narrative in our head, it's actually an illusion. Like, I think that, like, that's not necessarily something, I mean, I don't know, obviously, if this is true. I don't know if this can be proven, but this is what I believe right now. Where it's like, or it's one of my new ideas.
Right.
Where, like, I feel like people think about the narrative and they're like, well, it's the truth. It's like, I'm interpreting. And obviously, by calling it a narrative, the hope is that you understand that it's fictional.
Right.
Like, it's something you make up. But I think to use this word, like, the narrative is an illusion. And it's actually not, like, the total truth of you or your situation or of the world or what life is about or whatever. I think is, like, helpful because that is being like, this is an illusion that I can, like, choose to believe or not believe. Then, or choose to see or not see, then you're, like, given the opportunity to, like, step outside it and return.
Right. Well, you know, it's, I'm loving the
pants.
I'm loving your pants. And I'm loving touching them.
I could take them off. For those listening, I just ripped my pants open.
On the side.
On the side. I didn't show
like
any
track
of my
pants.
business.
That's okay.
Yeah, they could come totally off. They're Williams, like, pull them off pants.
I really like it.
And you have to do it from, he says you have to do it from the ankles up.
Right.
Because if you do it from the bottom, like, you get stuck.
That's so funny. Right, you've got full.
You could, like, totally release. I could pull these pants off.
That's so funny.
Yeah, if we were all in the room together, maybe I would do that. Just for the fun of it.
But you're not allowed.
It would be very surprising.
But they're not allowed in the room.
No, they're not allowed in the room. Just me and Maya. That's one-on-one. Cheers.
Hey. In terms of narrative stuff.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I'm spouting so many things that really, really have helped me throughout the years and I think are so true and so beautiful. But I'm noticing as I share them, I'm like, these are other people's ideas. And I love that, like, when you're talking about how you have stumbled upon the idea of narrative as illusion, I'm like, damn, yeah.
Yes.
Like, you're coming up with your own language that resonates for you.
Although I would say that this is supported by things that I've been reading.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
okay.
but it does feel like
yours.
Yours. And I have had ideas that feel like my own, and then later they've been supported.
Yes.
So it's a bit of both. It's like I'm both reading a lot of stuff right now that is helping me form my ideas, but then also have independently come up with ideas.
Yeah. No,
and in a way, I think it's totally okay for them to be other people's ideas. Because if they resonate with you, it's like it's pretty much your idea.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, 100%. And also, like, what's the why is there so much pressure for us to, like, have the, I don't know.
Yeah, and why does it, and, like, it doesn't matter, like, it only matters if you're being like, I want my idea to be right or something like that. But if you're like, that rings true.
That sounds,
right?
Cool.
You know, it's like, I think that it's like, to me, and this again has to do with what I'm going through.
Yeah.
My great opening. When I was in my early 20s, I had my great softening, and now I'm having my great opening. But
narrative.
Like, interesting. Right. Narrative. Get off of me, you narrative. Stop.
No. I also think
illusioning me.
But I also think storytelling is beautiful. Come on.
Of course.
It's not going to save you. But it can be appreciated.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, fuck. What was I going to say? No, I mean, we're having a good time.
Yeah.
What was it?
You had a great softening, a great opening.
Yeah.
It's one of your big ideas.
My big ideas.
Oh, what was it? Oh.
Whatever.
Okay.
I don't know.
Fair.
Maybe it'll come to me.
Well, it might come back to you now. In terms of having your own ideas versus getting it from someone else.
Oh, right. Almost like every idea is like everyone's idea. And Like, I think, and again, I think almost like this idea that individual people, like, I just think that, like, there's something, like, basically, like, how I came to believe in what is traditionally known as God was a theory that I came up with myself that I think was supported by my meditation practice, where, and I'll say this because it's an anecdote. I don't always put this together, so maybe I'll try it out and be like, I don't know. But I had this experience where I had a desire after my first, like, intensive with meditation. There was a woman in my class who was very grating, and she was very not present, and she would talk and talk and talk and tell all these vivid stories, and it was clear that you're like, oh, this is like a woman who's like very verbal but has a lot of pain. And she just like didn't really get how to do what we were trying to do there. And I had an experience at the beginning of the week where I like had to have this dinner with her, and it made me feel so awful, and I like cried afterwards. Like I like took on all this pain about it. And then at the end of the week, I was meditating, and it occurred to me that I could heal her. Like I was like, I have all this energy. Like I had this feeling of abundance and like bounty of energy. And I was like, I could send this to her. Right.
That you like, didn't have previously, insofar as like... That I didn't have
previously, and I never in my fucking life thought about healing another person. Like I was never thinking of myself as a person who would want to do that. I was like, I would be a bad teacher. Like I just didn't think of myself as a person who was like about like connecting and supporting. Like at that time. Or like that really wasn't a part of my, I mean, I always loved my friends and stuff. Like I knew I was social, but I like didn't have the self-image of myself of being someone who's like soft and sensitive and like wants to heal someone. And it was like so amazing to me that had occurred to me. And I think that like that, along with like being a performer and all this stuff about energy and talk about energy in the room, and like it kind of like led me to have this theory of God as like interconnectedness, essentially. Like there's actually like all of human consciousness, like, and maybe over all of time, kind of like is here. And or somewhere that we have access to. And like that thing, like that big great like cloud or something of energy, like spirit, is like God. And you know what I mean? Like that's how I believe in it.
And we kind of like sew through the fabric, or like we're kind of like engaging.
Like we're all a part of it. Like
okay,
we are God. We are God, and like we create God, and God creates us, and it's like all one big thing.
It's a jump that I don't know how to make.
But like that, basically like the energy that connects the two of us, like there's something about that is like the great, it is the thing that I believe in.
You know, I think it is like,
I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that is obviously informing this, but
100%.
I'm just trying to, where did it come from? And that's what I think is so cool about the improv, is because like you're sort of simulating that for people's enjoyment, like live in front of their eyes.
Being in that togetherness space. But see, that's where obviously like that is a concept that like I think is pretty
it makes sense to me,
and like relatively common in like an enlightened space, right?
Like when like Buddhism or whatever. Or like spiritual centers,
and like a sense of religion, a sense of spirituality, whatever it is. Like people who have like a more enlightened take on life, I feel like very often gravitate towards that. And then I'm like,
I'm so curious.
Maybe it's, you know, I'm like sitting here trying to judge whether it is good or bad, but
it doesn't matter.
Whatever. It's
we don't know if it's good or bad.
I'm so attached to the individual, but I feel so. When I think about you and I connecting here, I'm thinking about Carol and Maya connecting. I'm not thinking about us as a part of something. I'm thinking about like the kind of two electric poles. You know?
Yes, like you're still kind of stuck in that person.
But in a way where, for me, I find really exciting and positive. Where I'm like,
totally.
And your person, and your person and your person, like the individual is really important to me.
Right. They're bringing something to this.
Yeah. And so it's like, I think changing the idea of an individual from like a fixed person to a person with like boundless energy and capability is a cool shift, but like relinquishing that sense of like me as individual is just very tricky for me.
Well, I would say that essential to this idea that I'm describing is like the individual, not so much in as like a figure or like a great man or something or like a hero in the way that like stories often whatever, or even the stories of like how we tell history and stuff like that, like we attach it to like a great thinker or something. But the individual is very important in my theory because it's like the more that the individual is giving to this, like the higher we all become or something. Yes. So it's like the electricity between us is like benefiting from us both like being people who are like loving to ourselves, like reflective, like interested in connecting, like, and we don't even have to do that stuff, but just like all the stuff that makes us like is like the more that someone is like able to tap into like what makes them them and like celebrate it and embrace it and like elevate it in their own way, I think is like something that helps there just be more of like the good energy. You know what I mean? Like life affirming rather than something that's like life diminishing or like taking away from it.
See, and that I can get down with where it's like I said when you were trying to describe like being a part of everything, like I said, we are sewing through the fabric. Right. That's how I think of it, is an individual on a sewing needle going in and out and up and down throughout the large fabric. Yeah. And what you were describing sounded like it's already been, we're already stitched in. Yes. We're already a part of it.
Actually, yeah, I think what I think of it is less of like an object and more of like a cloud of gas. Yeah. And like what you were talking about, the electricity thing, I think that works, and it's like we're all particles in the cloud of gas and we're like coming into contact with each other and like sending electricity to each other. Yeah. And then like the gas itself is like charged by us or something. Right. Yeah, rather than the fabric. Yeah. But that might be another way. I just haven't thought about it.
Yeah. Fabric is like an endless. You know?
And to me, fabric feels more static or something than like the gas, which is like, it's easy for me to imagine it like that because it has that feeling.
And you're right. It is more static. Yeah. And maybe that's just how I view the idea of a collective consciousness, sort of. It's like as this kind of static, like that's what it is. It's like a consciousness.
And there's a feeling of that too, because it's like, if you think about it, of being like, if it's all time, or like some people are like, there's like destiny, where it's like everything has already happened and is already happening, and that can actually be, I have found recently to be like a very freeing idea of like sort of like everything happens for a reason and I don't know why. But if I like surrender myself to that feeling, I don't have to hate myself. Or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I don't have all the answers, like blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But yeah, I think the fabric is like, there is a way of like, if we're thinking of it as like, well, all this already exists. It's like, oh, right, of course, it's a big piece of fabric.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's tricky. And it's like, it's such a funny balance I feel in my own brain where I'm like, I have a lot of resentment towards philosophy and the idea of like theories about how to live. And yet I'm very excited by talking about life and talking about ways to live. Do you know what I mean? Like, totally. I resent the actual theory itself, but I'm really interested in engaging in the conversations around them. Yeah. Which, so I get this like, I in conversations like this, I always feel like I'm so in it, and then I have a moment where I'm like, what? We don't know. Like, this is, I don't know. Like, we're trying to reach some truth in talking about this. Yeah. Where I'm like, I don't fucking know. No, yeah. But then I'm so and I'm not talking really about this conversation, I'm talking about it in my life.
Just in general, yeah. Yeah, well, I feel like it's also like a lot of like philosophy, or like, it's like divorce, like I think there's like an important, like people talk, I feel like in like politics recently, people talk about like praxis or whatever, like the importance of like theory and practice going together. And I think that like that's like, oh, philosophy, they're like giving you ideas about like how life can work, but it's like, but ultimately like, the experience of the person is like,
it feels divorced.
Yes, and I feel like I'm like, oh, I want people to feel more empowered, like in themselves, to be like, my experiences are like telling me something that like I actually can know more than I think that I know.
Yeah, it's exploration.
Well, and then this is something I'm gonna see if I can bring back something that we were talking about a long time ago about like, there was something about like the improv and returning and like being on the sidelines and like when someone is like struggling in that way, this is like the connection between the improv and like the pain plus resistance equals suffering. It's like when they're struggling on the sidelines, it's like because like they're having the pain of like judging themselves. They're feeling the resistance of like judging myself and inaction. And so it's like that is like that principle. Like it's like, oh, you're like creating suffering for yourself in the show when like we're actually like trying to like create joy. And like and like have love or something like that.
Well, no, it's like it's embracing the I don't know.
It's embracing the
I don't know with Carol.
I don't know with Caroline is. And that's exactly what it is. And guess what? We have far surpassed my greatest dreams for what I hope this podcast might be with you tonight.
Let's go.
Thank you so much, Maya, for being here.
Of course. I really
did. You enjoy yourself?
I did enjoy myself. And it's like, this is me and you get hype. We love talking like this.
We could stay up.
We do it all the time.
We do it all the time. It feels so good. I love having friends like this, and I hope that everyone has friends like this. And I want people to feel safe with their friends and feel love with their friends. And one final thing I wanted to say that just occurred to me about the conversation was like, and this idea of like someone else's ideas or like the ideas of improv, like the ones that have been written down and like thinking you have to prescribe to them. It's like ultimately the thing that is most important is like creating a space where like one feels like there's like, it's important to protect one's autonomy and like their own like freedom of thought and like an ability to trust themselves. Like those are all things that need to be supportive in order for us to like do this greater work.
You have to have the own, which might take care of your own house.
Like to acts of creation, like on your own or with another person.
Well, it's funny when you were saying like improv like is this moment of collective consciousness, and I'm like, yes it is, but what I resonate with is improv is a way of empowering your own personal voice and then using that voice in collaboration with others. That's my individualist take.
Cool. That's interesting because like voice for me has been a tricky topic.
So funny.
Or like one that has like gone in my head where I'm like, what's my fucking voice?
No. It's already
but everyone's different. It's already coming out. And I don't know. And it's you had given us such a beautiful ending, and I was like, well, I don't know. But I just really need to get in that I think that like one of my values is respecting other people's autonomy.
You hear that?
I like always want to be that? Like, I wish I want to be like, I'm like, I just, whatever. I have so much more to say. I know. And it's never ending. We have so many ideas.
We can literally, I'm serious. We are going to talk about this once the podcast
is over. It's not over. It's never over.
Exactly.
Life is a process. Ooh. Okay.
Well, I love you. I love you so much.
And we love you.
We love you as well.
And we love you as well.
Thank you. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.